So welcome to the first full episode of the podcast, and we got the video up and running. I'm still working on the video, trying to get everything set up right, but I wanted to get it up and going. Having something is better than nothing in my eyes. Today, what we're gonna go over is completing 75 hard. For those of you that don't know, the past few weeks I've been doing 75 hard, and I just finished this past weekend. We're also going to go over doing the 4x4x48 challenge, which is something that David Goggins does every year to raise money for charity. And I'll get more into depth in all of this stuff later, but just giving you a brief little overview of what we're going to be going over today. I'm also going to try and knock this all out in one go. Like, we're just going to go at it. No cuts, no edits, no nothing. It's just going to be bam, real, right in your face. But yeah, 75 hard, 4x4x48 challenge, and then also we're going to be going over some real estate stuff, but I wanted to get that 75 hard and 4x4x48, 4x4x48 out of the way first, and then in the real estate sector stuff, we're going to be going over, I got it written down right here. So the U.S. housing market, is it going to go bust? Obviously, nobody knows for sure. But with the way prices in housing are going up, everybody thinks that sooner or later it has to just plummet down. So we'll be going over that. And then also new builds. So a lot of people, because they can't get their homes, they can't get their hands on homes that are already built because the market is so competitive and they're getting tired of putting offer after offer after offer in. We're going to be going over new builds, how the price of lumber has gone up and how that's affecting new builds, and everything regarding that. But let's jump into this. It was a crazy 75 days for me. So let me break it down for you. First, I'm going to take a sip of my drink because it's been a crazy day already and I haven't had time to do a lot of stuff, and I just got done setting up all this stuff for the podcast for just like the second time ever. I've never done a podcast before, never done YouTube videos really. So I'm trying to figure everything out and get everything set up as best as I can. But anyways, for those of you that are watching on YouTube, you can see me, but I'm trying to describe what I'm doing for those of you who are just listening on the podcast. So yeah, 75 hard. So for the past 75 days, I've been doing a program by Andy Frisella. And for those of you that don't know, Andy Frisella is the creator, one of the creators, I believe it's him and his brother, are the creators of First Form, the supplement company. So what they did is basically, or what he did is basically create a program called 75 Hard, where for 75 days you follow, I guess you would call it, I guess you could call it, I mean, a set of rules. But it's basically just a program that outlines what you're going to do for 75 days. And the reason why I did 75 Hard wasn't necessarily just because I wanted to see physical gains. It was because I've been told by multiple high-level achievers that 75 Hard will mentally change the way you work, the amount of work that you put out, how you feel about work, and just your overall mental, it just gives you a mental edge, I guess you could say, and it allows you to grow mentally and not just physically. So that was one of the massive reasons as to why I did 75 Hard. I have generally been an active person. I've always done sports. As a kid, I was always in sports, soccer, football, basketball a lot, tennis a lot. I've always tried to stay physically fit and active. That's just been, I'm a person who thrives off competition. So being able to go after a goal and be going after that goal in a competitive mindset is something that really helps me as an individual. But to outline 75 hard for you guys, basically what it is you, for 75 days, you follow a diet, which a diet, it can be anything that you really want. So I've counted macros before. I knew how to do that. And I knew the amount of I knew my appropriate macros. So I chose to do it that way. But that's the first one. Follow a diet, read 10 pages per day, exercise twice a day for 45 minutes. Each exercise has to be, or each workout has to be 45 minutes long, and one of those workouts has to be outside. So total of 90 minutes, 2 workouts a day. And then there's no cheat meals, no drinking alcohol, and you have to take a progress picture every single day. But, oh yeah, also you have to drink a gallon of water per day. And that was one of the ones that you would think wouldn't really be a big deal, because drinking a gallon of water a day, like, as long as you drink consistently throughout the day, like, oh yeah, it's not that hard, it's not that big of a deal. But that was one of the things that I had the most trouble with, to be honest with you. I've never been an individual who just carries around a water bottle. Like, I know some people will religiously just carry around a water bottle and drink throughout the day. But I've never been that person. So that was actually one of the hardest things for me. A lot of people, anybody who knows me, especially in the past like year or so, knows that I've tried to read a lot more. So reading those 10 pages per day was not necessarily very hard for me. On a lot of occasions, I was reading more than 10 pages a day, just because I'm a person who loves to take in information and try and build up my knowledge base. So that was probably the easiest thing for me, is reading those 10 pages. But just to give you guys a quick little overview of how because I know some people want to do 75 hard for the physical gains, because you might have worked out in the past and you just never got into a groove, or you might be overweight now. You might have just worked out in the past and you just let it go for a really long time, and now you're overweight and you're eating the wrong things, and so you want that physical gain that 75 hard gives you. So I'm not gonna lie to you, when I first started 75 hard, I know I said I didn't do it initially for the physical aspect of the program, but I was definitely overweight for my size. I'm 5'9", 5'10", and I was sitting at 198 pounds. And that is insane for me, because the most I've ever weighed, and this was when I was just strictly weightlifting, barely doing any cardio in high school, was 180 pounds. The most I've ever weighed was 180 pounds. So it was ridiculous for me to weigh 198 pounds. I was putting in a lot of work on my real estate stuff and everything like that, but I was also just being negligent in the fact of taking care of myself by eating right, not drinking a whole lot of alcohol and stuff like that. So I would say I was probably drinking like at least maybe 3 or 4 times a week, maybe more sometimes, and not necessarily just like getting trashed, but I was still drinking, so that and when I say drinking, I mean like drinking alcohol, because one of the things with 75 hard, you can't drink alcohol at all, and a lot of people don't realize how much that affects them alone, just drinking alcohol. Because some people will say, oh yeah, well, if I only have like 3 or 4 beers every other day or something like that, like, it's not that big of a deal. But what alcohol does to your body, and I'm not going to really get into it because I don't know 100% of the specifics, but it's not good for your body, and it makes you gain weight very, very, very quickly. So initially, when you stop drinking, you can see those, probably, I would say, if you do drink pretty consistently, you probably have like 10 to 12 pounds of just like alcohol weight on your body. So initially you can see that massive jump, and it happens pretty quickly, especially if you've been an active person in the past, and you have like muscle memory and stuff like that, and you can get back into that groove of things and working out and everything like that. And then you also work out outside. So if you live in like a hot climate like I do in Georgia, then you're gonna sweat way more than you would if you were just like lifting weights or doing like a bodybuilding type workout inside in the AC. So overall, from start to finish, I went down to 160 pounds. So that's what, 38 pounds? Yeah. So from start to finish, I lost 38 pounds, went down to 160. My normal weight is probably, when I'm loosely tracking my macros and I know, and I'm still working out twice a day, because usually, even before 75 hard, I try and do twice a day. Twice a day workouts, because I'm a runner. So what I'll do is like I'll do a strength-based training program, and then I'll also do my run workout. So I have those two throughout the day. But yeah, 38 pounds. I went down from 198, weigh 160 right now, and that is pretty close to my normal weight. When I'm loosely tracking macros and everything, like I was saying just a second ago, I probably weigh anywhere between 163 and like 166 or 167. So now that I'm back to that, I would like to stay around the 160 range, because I'm running more. I'm focusing on running more as a sport. I've got a half marathon coming up on the 5th of June, and then after that, I've got a full marathon planned for November. So yeah, so for the physical, to give you guys an idea, I lost 38 pounds. And that was with me tracking my macros, like I said. I didn't take any days off, because with this program, you can't take any days off. You have to do the full entire week. You're doing 2 workouts per day, every day. So what I try to do is, usually with the normal way I would train would be to have 2 days off or 1 day off, dependent on how my body felt that week. So I would either do Wednesday and Saturday off, or I would do Sunday off if I was only taking 1 day off. But with 75 hard, you can't take any days off. So I was trying to do active recovery on Wednesdays and Saturdays. But me being competitive, usually if my body felt good, I would just do 2 full bore workouts those days. If my body didn't feel good, then I would probably hit like an air bike ride for 45 minutes. I would do the stair stepper for 45 minutes. And so I still got in a pretty decent workout during those, during that time of active recovery. But yeah, so physically, that's pretty much the breakdown of it. And I would say also, for those of you who aren't used to really tracking macros or anything like that, or following a diet, me myself, I don't really like the word diet, so I didn't follow a specific diet, just because I don't think diets are sustainable. With macros, you get to a point where you've done it so much, you know portion sizes, you know what your body needs, based off of how hard you've trained and stuff like that. When you do it for a very long time, you know these things. And obviously you can go back and forth between loosely tracking and strictly tracking. And when you're strictly tracking your macros, you're gonna see more in-depth results. But when you're loosely tracking, you're not losing anything, because you know where you need to be and how much an actual portion size is. You're not overeating, you're not doing X, Y, and Z that's gonna make you gain weight. So I think macros or counting your macros and learning that stuff is way more sustainable. And another thing with 75 hard is, and I've heard Andy Frisella talk about this on his podcast, and that's another thing. If anybody wants to know, I'm just kind of breaking it down from my point of view. If anybody wants to go into specifics, hasn't heard about this, and is just hearing about this from me, all you have to do is type in Andy Frisella on Apple Podcast, Andy Frisella on YouTube, and then put 75 hard after it, and he has his own podcast, he has his own YouTube channel, and he'll break it down for you. And so you can get a more in-depth, you can hear other people talk about how it affected them, what they did. But yeah, so I kind of lost track of what I was saying, but yeah, that's kind of the breakdown of 75 hard right there. I would say the hardest part of it was the 2 workouts. Actually, no, that's a lie. The hardest part of it seemed like it was going to be the easiest, and it was the drinking a gallon of water a day, because I found myself all the time trying to catch up on drinking water right before I went to bed, and then I would get up like 10 times every night just to pee because I had so much water in my system. But you can kind of negate that. There's a way to negate that, especially if you're already used to walking around with a water bottle all day and drinking water throughout the day. I just myself wasn't. But the next hardest thing after that would probably be, it's harder than you think if you don't want to run. I personally love running, and I kind of discovered that through 75 hard, because one of the harder things is if you're not a member of like a CrossFit gym or a gym that has like an outdoor workout area or anything like that, it's kind of hard to figure out different workouts that you can do outside for 45 minutes. So most of my 45-minute workouts were running. And when I first started this, I hated running. I'm not gonna lie, I hated it. I, at this point, love it. It's one of my favorite things because it pushes me physically every single time. No matter what type of running I'm doing, whether it be like a tempo run where I'm slowing down and then doing fast-paced sprints or something like that, or I'm just doing sprints and then I rest for like 2 minutes or for a certain distance or anything along those lines, running always challenges me. It pushes my body, and that is one thing that I've always enjoyed when it comes to working out, is something that will consistently challenge you. Because from what I've found, I know I'm not like the strongest dude in the weight room, and there's obviously places that I can improve, but there are certain workouts that I'll go in there and do, and I'll be like, okay, well, after this I should be sore, but I'm really not. And that's kind of one of those things where the weight room is fun, and I do love throwing around heavy weight, but not every single workout that I do pushes me to my max. And that is not necessarily to say that the program sucks or that I'm not trying hard enough or anything like that. It's just that I get so used. I've been weightlifting for a very long time now. I would say since I was probably 13. So that's almost 15 years. So sooner or later you get used to doing these movements, and it just takes so many reps or so much weight that it just gets kind of boring. So yeah, running has been one of the big things that I've taken away from 75 hard that has really changed the way I work out, because now instead of just doing like a strength-based workout or like a CrossFit workout or HIIT workout, I'll do strength-based, which a lot of the strength focuses on my legs now because I really need leg strength when it comes to running. And then I'll do a running type of workout, and that for me just pushes my body in general, and it gives me such a great feeling of accomplishment afterwards. So that leads me kind of into the next thing that I wanted to talk about. Is a lot of people will kind of joke about it because there's so many people out there these days that say like, oh, you need to wake up at 5:30 in the morning, push yourself first thing in the morning, and then you'll have a great day, blah, 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 blah. And for me, I kind of was one of those people that was like fighting the fact that getting up at 5 a.m. like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. I could still get up at 6 and then work out after work, or I could get up at 7:30 in the morning and then have a good breakfast and chill. But what I've found for me, and I think it has something to do with my competitive nature, and a lot of entrepreneurs and small business owners, anything, whatever you want to call it, those people are inherently competitive a lot of the time. So in my mind, when you wake up at 5 a.m., you get out of the house by 5:30, and you go do a really hard workout for an hour and a half, 90 minutes, 45, if you break it up into 45 and 45, then you have already put yourself in a competitive mindset because you're pushing yourself. And then on top of that, if the workout that you have that morning is great, you're already going to be in a good mood. You're going to be energized. And trust me when I tell you this, you are going to be energized. When I first started getting up early in the morning, I was skeptical because I was like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I am tired as hell after I get done with these workouts. But I would say about a week into it, I got to a point where I was like, okay, now I'm energized, and this is sustainable energy. It's not just like chugging down a cup of coffee and having 30 minutes worth of energy and then I crash. Also, for those of you who are watching on YouTube, I forgot to turn on my light, so I'm about to turn it on. Let's see. Ooh. Anyways, like I was saying, light's on now. So yeah, it definitely gives you a better and more competitive mindset throughout the day, and it gives you sustainable energy throughout the day. You might feel like I did, that you're not energized at all at the beginning of it, but I promise you that'll change, especially with your diet getting on track, and when you start eating better, when you stop drinking and stuff like that, it changes how much energy and sustainable energy throughout the day that you do have. That is one of the greatest things that happened to me during 75 Hard, is that implementation gave me more sustained energy throughout the day. And when I first started 75 Hard, I didn't believe that, because I had tried it for maybe like 2-3 days at a time, and I was like, yo, I have no energy, I'm so tired. But I also wasn't thinking about the fact that I was still drinking, I was staying up later than I should have, I was not consistently doing the wake up at 5 a.m. and go do your workouts. So consistency is the key when it comes to that. And don't just write it off the first 3 days in, because it's going to take a little bit for your body to get used to these things, your body to get used to waking up. Once you start going to bed at the right time, once you start eating right, doing all those things, that is going to give you that sustainable and greater energy throughout the day. So yeah, that is pretty much all I have when it comes to 75 Hard. I don't want to harp on it too much. It is a great program. I could probably talk about it all day, honestly. That's why I say I don't want to harp on it too much. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to reach out to me about that, and I'll answer them from my perspective. It might be a little bit different from your perspective, but I promise you, when you do 75 Hard, it's going to change you for the better. And if you don't want to reach out to me about it, or you think I'm just bullshitting, you can look up Andy Frisilla. He has multiple podcasts on 75 Hard. He is the creator of 75 Hard, and he has podcasts just talking about what 75 Hard is. He has podcasts where he's talking to people who have completed 75 Hard just like me, and they break it down from their perspective as well. So if you don't want to reach out to me, or if you don't believe me, just look him up and I'll put links to it in the description for the YouTube video so you guys can check it out. But yeah, if you got any questions, feel free to reach out and I'll be happy to answer them. But segue from 75 hard to 4x4x48. So this past weekend, because this will drop on Friday, the 21st of, we're in May, 21st of May, 2021. So yeah, this past weekend, which would have been Saturday and Sunday, I did the 4x4x48 challenge, and I initially missed it because I was doing 75 hard, and I knew that if I did the 4x4x48 challenge, then the day after I was done with the challenge, it was gonna be ridiculously hard, not just mentally for me to get up and do a workout or two workouts, especially one outside, but it might be detrimental to my body. So I held off, and I told myself that I was gonna do 4x4x48 the last 2 days of the 75 hard challenge, so that I could get still get the 45-45 workout in, 45-45 workout in on Saturday and Sunday, and then that way I could finish it out strong with something that was really, really challenging. So the week leading up to my last 2 days of 75 hard, I did lighter workouts. So I did short runs, and I did light and upper body strength training, so that I wasn't putting too much strain on my legs. I was keeping my legs stretched out, but my body was ultimately recovered when I did get to Saturday and Sunday. So initially, I would say the furthest I've ever ran without stopping was about 12 miles. So I would usually do, and I've done that multiple times. This half marathon that I'm gonna be running coming up will be the first full half marathon that I've ever done, and then the full marathon that I have after the half marathon will be the first marathon that I have ever competed in. I've always ran just for cardio, but I've never really run distance, and I've never really enjoyed running until just recently. So yeah, I've done about max without stopping 12 miles. So this is the furthest I've ever run is 48 miles in 2 days. Obviously I did stop because that's what the challenge is. You do 4 miles, and then 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. It's pretty self-explanatory. So you do 4 miles, and then, so hour 1, 2, 3, 4, on that 4th hour, start running your 4 miles again. So it ends up being 48 miles total. So the first leg that I had, so the first 4 miles was obviously pretty easy. My body was almost fully recovered because I had been doing light workouts and nothing too strenuous. So first 4 miles was all right. Second 4 miles, second leg, great. I finished those. I did those at about a 7-minute and 30 to 7-minute and 40-second pace per mile. And that is where I'll start this story, because anybody who tries to push it to that pace, I would suggest that unless you're like a normal 6-minute mile runner, so like say on a normal day you ran a 4 mile and all your miles were in the 6-minute pace range, I would say whatever your normal pace is, try and drop it back by about a minute, because the problem that I ran into was, first off, the fact that I was running on surfaces that changed. The route that I took initially for the first 16 miles, I did it for the first 16 miles. was slightly uphill, and I didn't think about that. And there's also like cracks in the ground, there's manhole covers, the surface changes heights a lot. And it's slight, but it's something that over time plays a factor on your body. So the first thing was the hill starting out. It's a slight gradual incline. And looking at it, you're like, this isn't that big of a deal. But over time, it's a pretty decently long gradual incline. I would say probably the first half mile is an incline. So that was the first thing that kind of screwed me up. It put a lot of strain on my legs. Like my legs, by mile 16, my legs were very tired. And also my calves and my hamstrings were getting thrashed. One, because when I would come back on my route, instead of being a gradual incline, there was a gradual decline for about a half a mile. So that was thrashing my hamstrings. And then the next thing was the change in heights, just because there's like I said, there's like manhole covers, there's cracks in the ground, there's curbs, stuff that I just was like, okay, well, it's not that much change in height, so it's not that big of a deal. Over time, it makes a big difference. My calves were getting thrashed, and that was leading to my left hamstring becoming very tight. So I don't know the specific name for it. I'm sure there's got to be, but basically the spot behind your kneecap, and like think directly behind your kneecap where those tendons are, that was tightening up. So it was painful for me to, after the first 60 miles, it was painful for me to move my leg out and in, out and in, out and in, which is obviously very important when you run. So that was the biggest and hardest obstacle to climb over, because after mile 16, a lot of people say it's kind of hard to run at night. I don't know. I didn't have a huge issue with it. I also didn't have a huge issue with sleep. I think total during those 2 days, I got 4 hours of sleep, total, because I tracked my sleep, and that's what, my sleep tracker, my Whoop right here on my arm was telling me that I got total amount. So I'm pretty sure it was like, it might've been like 4.5 or 4 hours and some change, but total, that was about it. I didn't really have a problem with that. But I'm sure that could affect a lot of people. Anyways, so after about mile 16, my left leg, my right leg was great the entire time. Amazing. But my left leg, and I think it was because, like I said, there was changes in elevation, albeit they were slight changes, but my left leg was taking a lot of those changes, because it just so happened to be that those height changes were taking place on my left leg. And that was tightening up and making my hamstrings work more. So through about mile 16 to about mile 28, I would say, I was mentally fighting the fact that my left leg was hurting, and it was hard for me to move it in and out. And I didn't mention this at the beginning, but you can do the 4x4x48 challenge, walking, however, with the bike, however you can get those 4 miles done, you can do it. But my personal challenge to myself was I wanted to run every single mile. And I don't mean just run, walk, get the 4 miles done. I mean, I wanted to run every single mile, and I wanted to keep it at least at a 9-minute pace or below. So after that, I didn't mention that at the beginning, but I wanted to kind of throw that out there. So from mile 16 to about 28, back on the leg thing, I was mentally fighting the fact that my head was just telling me the entire time, like, you gotta walk, you gotta walk, you gotta walk, your legs hurting, and it was just pounding in my head. It was like a freaking, I don't know, like when a song is stuck on repeat in your head, or you can't get a song out of your head. That was basically what it was, but with pain and my head telling me to stop. So that was the biggest challenge. And then for those miles 16 through 28, through that time, after I got to mile 28, I kind of started loosening up. If you've read David Goggins' book, and like I said, this was his challenge. He does it every year for charity. If you've read his book, it kind of outlines the fact that a lot of times as individuals, we get to a point where we think we've given everything that we have to give, and we're not even close. The 60-40 rule is what he goes over in his book, and it's basically saying that once we've given 60% of all we have, we think that 60% is our 100%, but we're only at about 60% of what we have to give. So you've still got another 40% to give. And so that really rings true to me in situations like that, because what was keeping me from walking was the fact that I was just telling myself, you're not even close to 60%. You know you can hit marathon distance easily. You can hit half marathon distance without your body shutting down. So even though my brain was just pounding, you're hurting, I was also thinking the entire time, this isn't 60%. This isn't my 60%. Until I can't walk anymore, I'm not at 60%. Because when I hit 60%, my 60% is, in my mind, not being able to walk. Because after that, if I can't walk with my legs, I can still use my arms to move my body. And I know that sounds a little extreme or dramatic, or to some people it probably sounds corny, but to get through a challenge like that, it just takes that type of mindset. Because a lot of you guys, like I said, I personally was not very fatigued, albeit with sleep throughout the entire thing, but a lot of people are going to be very tired, and it's going to be very hard for them to even get up and get outside. So you're just going to have a very strong, tough mental mindset in those times if you are going to do a challenge like this. I ended up finishing all 48 miles. I ran every mile like I wanted to initially, and I think the slowest mile that I had was around like a 9:05. I might have had some miles where it was like 9 minutes and 20 seconds or so, but still, I know I said earlier I wanted to stay 9 minutes or below, but I still am very pleased with that, just because I haven't been a serious runner for about probably 4 weeks. Because even when I first started this, I wasn't trying to run every single day. I was trying to do other CrossFit type workouts, because I have like sandbags that I own and kettlebells and stuff like that, so I can take those outside and do workouts with them. But once I kind of got bit, so to say, by the run bug and got more into it, I was doing more run type workouts. So for me to be able to run 48 miles and keep all the miles below a 9.5 minute pace, I'm very happy with that. Obviously, when I do it again, I would like to be able to stay in the 7 to like 8.5 minute range so I can show improvement. But for the first time doing it, I would say I'm very happy with it. I would also like to be able to find a better run route, because that one really ate up my legs, and I feel like I could have done a faster pace if I had a better route. Kind of like when the 2-hour marathon, the world record got broken for fastest marathon in the world, and they broke the 2-hour window. They did it on the perfect track with the perfect setup at the perfect pace. So if I could find a better run route just to help me out and give me a little bit of an advantage, I would love to be able to do that next time. But overall, it's been, so I finished on Sunday or Monday morning. But I finished on Monday morning and it's Thursday now and my body feels pretty good. So no serious injuries came out of it. I know some people will like run and their feet and Achilles muscle, like their muscles in their feet and their Achilles will get really tight, and sometimes they'll break like their foot. The small bones in your foot will break because the muscles are constricting around it so much. I've seen that happen to people. I've seen people finish the 48 miles with broken feet and stuff like that. I don't have any serious injuries. Thank God, because I have a half marathon coming up in like 2 weeks. So, yeah, no serious injuries. I would definitely do it again. It was one of the harder things that I've ever done. I don't want to say hardest thing ever, but it's probably pretty close. And I would say a big majority of that, the reason why it's so hard is because you do get very little sleep, and then also you're stopping and starting a lot. And that makes your muscles tighten up when you start after a 4-hour rest period or 3.5 hours, however long you have before the next 4-hour window. Then your muscles are tight, so it takes them longer to get loose on those runs. And so that initial start is just a lot more agonizing. Another crazy thing that happened to me, and I'm not like a scientist, so I don't know exactly why this happened, but I want to attribute it to your lungs being a muscle. Because when I got into about the 30 to 48 mile range, my lungs felt a little bit tighter because, and I attribute that to them being a muscle because I was using them so much and I was stopping and starting, so they were getting tight. And basically what was happening is that because they were tight, or whatever was happening, I don't know, maybe I'm dying, who knows. But anyways, when I started out in those longer distances, after I got to about mile 30, like I said, my heart rate was higher because I was breathing a little bit heavier because my lungs felt a little bit tighter. And I want to say that's because they're a muscle. I don't know. I could be dying, like I said, who knows. But that was one weird thing that happened to me during this challenge. And yeah, so that's the 4x4x48 breakdown. And I'm sure a lot of y'all are probably like, what the hell? This is supposed to be a real estate show. What does this have to do with anything? Well, the name of the show is Real Estate Mentality. And kind of like I was saying earlier, a lot of the people who are successful at real estate or own small businesses that are successful or are entrepreneurs, this whole show isn't necessarily just about real estate. It's about that mentality that it takes to make yourself very successful in these fields. Obviously, we are going to go over real estate things and what's going on in the real estate market and everything like that. But the whole point of this show is to break down the mindset behind being successful in those fields. And I believe that being active and pushing yourself and being competitive in whatever aspect we can is very important, because the mental gain that I took away from doing all of those things is greater than any physical gain that those things had on my body. Because starting off with 75 hard, I was afraid to pick up the phone and make cold calls. Now my main source of leads is through cold calls. And for anybody who says that that isn't a great way to pick up leads, you're insane. And we can talk about other ways to generate leads, because I don't believe as an individual in real estate that is the end all be all and that you should only have one way of generating leads. I think that's idiotic. And there are plenty of good ways to generate leads other than cold calling. But I think for the price and for the return, for the price and the return that you get from it, then it is the best way to generate leads. And also, it just makes you grow as a businessman or businesswoman, because you're learning how to talk to people, you're learning how to create conversations out of thin air, you're learning to listen to people. And what really 75 Hard did for me is it changed my aspect of what is actually hard. Picking up the phone and talking to somebody is not hard to me anymore because of all these things that I put myself through. And sure, you could say, well, you can do that without those physical things. And like, I'm sure you can, but it just gives me, and from what I've heard, other people, a very big edge, because you've already done all these things that are super hard. Talking to somebody randomly on the phone is not hard. Somebody telling you to screw off is not hard. Like, that is not something that affects me anymore, because I'm just trying to help these people and they're telling me to screw off, so it's their loss. And that's another thing that 75 Hard has kind of opened my eyes to. If you're on YouTube, you can see this, but I'm holding up the book right now, Meditations, and that is something that I came across because you have to read with 75 Hard. I was doing a lot more reading. So Meditations is a Stoic reflection, and it basically kind of outlines different views for Stoicism. And in Stoicism, basically, this isn't word for word, so don't quote me on it, because I know somebody will probably be like, you didn't say that right, or what the hell, like, that's not exactly what it said. But this is not word for word, but in Stoicism, they say something along the lines of, your perception is your reality. And you've probably heard people say that just in passing, or your mom and dad saying something like that, or whoever, one of your mentors, or maybe somebody on Instagram, Gary Vee or something like that. But your perception is your reality. And why I say this is because if you allow somebody, if you pick up the phone and your first cold call, you go, hey, this is so-and-so from so-and-so real estate, or this is so-and-so calling from whatever small business you own. And that person literally cusses you out and tells you how much of a piece of trash you are and everything like that. If you just think of it in the aspect of, well, that person isn't gonna let me help them, so that's their loss. You have a much greater chance of picking up the phone again and making another call that might lead to something great than if you were to get cussed out and say, man, that was terrible. These people hate me. I don't know what I'm gonna do. Because now you're in a negative mindset. If you're in a positive mindset, and once again, your perception is your reality. It's all in the way that you take it. So if you allow those things to affect you negatively, you're gonna be negative throughout the day. If you allow those things to not have a hold on you, then you're gonna be that much more well off, and you're gonna be, all right, they didn't want my help, let's go to the next one. Somebody's gonna wanna listen to you. Somebody's gonna wanna take your suggestions. Somebody's gonna want to sell their house. Somebody's gonna wanna buy your candles, whatever it may be that you are doing, or wherever you're reaching out, or however you're reaching out. Somebody is going to take that, and somebody's going to see the good in you, and then it's just going to have a snowball effect. So with kind of breaking that down, if you play into Stoicism, that was one of the things that I found through 75 Hard, just because I was doing a lot more reading, like I said. You can read into Stoicism. Meditations is a great book, like I just showed you guys, to kind of figure out what that is all about. I'm not saying that I'm a Stoic or anything, but I do like to take from their teachings. It's a great way to, I I don't know, learn how to handle things, I guess you could say. And then there's also other knowledge in there that can greatly help you throughout your lifetime, especially as an entrepreneur, small business owner, whatever you want to call it. Super helpful stuff. And it dates all the way back to the Roman Empire, and it's still around today. And it still holds true, pretty much everything that they say. So look into something like that. But anyways, yeah, so getting into the real estate side of the show, I know this has been a little bit of a longer one because I had to go over 75 hard and everything like that. But I promise you guys real estate stuff, and we're definitely going to go over real estate stuff. I don't have a guest here or anything today to bounce stuff off of, so I'm just going to go over it by myself. But what I've been running into with my customers is basically a lot of people will look at me and say, is it even worth us buying right now? Because the housing market has gone up so much that we don't believe that it's sustainable. Well, what I usually say to that is that, sure, there is no way to tell 100%. Like, I can't tell, the best analyst in the world can't tell 100% like what is going to happen tomorrow. But from my belief and from a lot of analysts' beliefs, we don't think that the housing market is going to crash. We do think we're going to see somewhat of a pause, and I put that in like air quotes because obviously there's still going to be houses sold and houses bought during that pause. But what I mean by pause is that the market is going to slow down, and we're still going to see somewhat of an increase, but it's not going to be a massive jump like we have been seeing. And then also, hopefully within the future, lumber prices are going to level out, and we're going to be able to build houses for normal prices, or at least they're going to level out, and we'll be able to get more inventory into the market so that it's, one, not as hard to get a home, and two, it's not, I wouldn't say not as expensive, but the prices will level out. And then also, because we have more inventory, it will be a little bit easier for people to get better deals on homes and stuff like that, and just easier in general for them to get homes. Because right now we just don't have the inventory, and that's why you see these crazy prices. Earlier today, there was an article written about how some analysts were going over the housing market, and I was reading it, and it basically was saying along the lines of that, and that obviously we don't know what's going to happen, but if you were to buy a house today, and even if we do see that if we do see that gradual increase, then you're still going to be building a decent amount of equity in that property. Another thing to take into account is how long do you think that you're going to be in that home. If you're going to be in that home for a long time, a housing market crash, especially if the crash happens 10 years after you bought the house and you have a ton of equity built up into that property, then I would say as an individual, why worry about it? Because if you have 10 years worth of equity built up into that property, even if you do have to sell it for a loss because you can't afford the mortgage payment anymore, you're probably not going to, well, that's a lie. You're probably not going to have to sell it at a loss. You might not make a lot of money off of it, but you're probably not going to have to sell it at a loss because you have 10 years worth of equity in it. And then you also have to take that into account of how high did we climb in those 10 years. So those are just things to take into account. I don't think it's a bad time to buy. I think we have to be realistic when we do go in to buy. You have to be prepared to buy. You have to be prepared to be patient. I just said you have to be prepared to buy. That's a ridiculous statement. Obviously, if you're buying a house, you have to be prepared to buy. But what I meant by that is that it pays to be patient. It pays to have a decent amount of cash on hand so that you can make a strong offer. And it also pays to have your credit in line because it is way easier if you don't have all cash, which most people don't have all cash. It's way easier and way more likely, I would say, for a conventional type loan to get accepted in this market. So if you do have a conventional loan and a decent amount of cash on hand, you've got a strong bidding hand. So yeah, those are the things that I like to tell my buyers to take into account. And really, nobody can tell what's going to happen today, tomorrow, a week from now, but the majority thinks that we are going to see a gradual increase and maybe like a pause. And I kind of explained what that pause means just a second ago. But with interest rates sticking around 2.5%, we don't foresee a crash in the foreseeable future. Take that with a grain of salt because nobody can read the market. Nobody can read the stock market. It's just not 100% ever, but you do have there's a strong reason as to why you should buy right now, reasoning as to why you should buy right now. There are also reasons to not buy if you are like a real estate investor. It's going to be really tough for you to get a property at a good price. So if you're an investor, my best advice would be to probably wait. Or another thing to do right now that you could do as an investor is to pick up land, vacant land. And because either most people that are buying right now that are driving the prices up are building new homes, or they're buying homes that are already on the market. And we know the homes that are already on the market and the homes that are being built, there's no inventory. It's a low inventory market. So if you are an investor and you have cash flow coming in, save up some of that cash flow that you would be using to buy a already built home, pick up land, vacant land, and wait for the lumber prices to go back down, or wait for the lumber prices to go and even out, and then build a home on that land for a decent price so that you can see a good return on your investment, instead of just trying to pay $30,000 over ask and then you've leveraged too much on your investment. It just doesn't make sense. But that is one thing that you can do as an investor: pick up vacant land, because no matter what, that land's going to be worth something, even if you don't end up building on it. And also, if you do end up building on it, when the prices level out, it probably is going to end up being, like, say you build a home on it for total with land costs $120,000. Once prices level out, you might have paid this $140,000 for the equivalent in a market like we are in, a low inventory market. So that would be my best advice to investors, just because of how the market is right now. There's always ways to invest your money in real estate. You just have to be creative with it. And I think that's a really good and creative way to do that right now. And that also leads me into, I've kind of talked about it during this, lumber prices for new builds. So new builds are still feasible. We can still make that happen. And that's another thing, that if my clients do have it in their budget, if they're getting tired of, say, offer after offer getting rejected just because maybe they don't have $30,000 worth of cash to put into the offer so they can offer over ask, or a decent amount over ask, then I always try and steer them towards new builds. The only downside with new builds is you might not get as much square footage as you would on a pre-built home right now, just because lumber prices are up. So, but there's a flip side to it. You kind of do get to pick and choose how you want the house and everything from the ground up. You get to not necessarily design it from zero, but you get to pick and choose, like I said. And so there are ups and downs to each one, but with lumber prices being up, it's just sometimes you can get more out of a already built home. But if you can't get one under contract, then what else are you gonna do? So a lot of times I'll steer my clients towards that, and that is always something that buyers can do, is to go, and a lot of people will talk about how like builders are so overpacked, and that might be true or slammed right now because a lot of people are trying to build houses, and that is true. But at the end of the day, it's our job to make stuff like that happen and to get in there and to get the process started for you guys. So that is always an option. One of the things that I did, one of the facts that I did want to kind of throw in there though, was that because of lumber prices being up around 340% year to date, that adds on about $36,000. Yeah, $36,000 to the average home build. And then, yeah, so just take that into account. Like I said, and I have said multiple times, you might be able to get more out of a pre-built home, more square footage, stuff like that, but it might end up being more of a headache. So at the end of the day, it might be worth it for you to just say, hey, I'm just gonna build and do it that way, even if we're not gonna get as much square footage. So there are pros and cons to each one. But if you haven't thought about that and your real estate agent hasn't mentioned new builds to you, maybe that could be an option. So just throwing that in there. But it's been an hour. This is a really long episode. I want to try and keep the episodes to around 45 minutes per every week, every Friday. But thank you guys for listening to me. I had a lot to talk about with 75 hard and the 4x4x48 challenge. But I thank you guys. I thank all of my listeners. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what I can do better. Let me know if you want to be on the podcast. Follow me on all my social medias. If you want to be on the podcast, just hit me up on Instagram or shoot me an email. It's not hard to find my email. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe. If you're just listening on the podcast, please subscribe. Give it a 5-star rating if you like it. And we will see you guys next week.